Finally, the reason why a lot of us are here today is the USGS aquifer recharge study. Work was done by their staff in August of this year. We will hear their commentary in the study shortly. Thanks to Hal Rooks, former GPAC chair, and Liz Loveland and Deborah Lakonoff, and to the GPAC board for diligently shepherding this important study through the legislative process and bureaucratic maze to get this accomplished. The first study was in 1994, and as you can imagine, this work needed to be updated for a long time. We went out to work on this, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, knowing that we needed, and a lot of these communities, and I think, Liz, correct if I'm wrong, but San Juan County also piggybacked on this, so we piggybacked on theirs. And I recognize that there are some water issues in there. And we were fully prepared to fund this, our portion of the $80,000, by going out to the community and asking for donations. But luckily we didn't have to do that, which was fantastic. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I think I would throw this over to Leland.
Hey, thanks. Hey, good to see everybody again. Thanks for having us. So I'm Leland Furig with the USGS. I haven't mentioned before, I've been with I'm a hydrologist with the USGS and the project lead on this groundwater study that we have, and been with the USGS for about 9 years. And this is Wendy Welch here. Wendy, I'll let you do an intro if you like.
Yeah, hi everybody. I think I was here a couple of years ago, so happy to be back. I lead up the groundwater section at the USGS office in Tacoma, and been kind of overseeing this project and as well as the San Juan County project. So just here today to listen in and see where you guys are at and help answer questions if you have them.
Okay, so I've got a little presentation that we've put together here, so I'll try to share my screen. Host disabled attendee screen share. Can we get the screen sharing enabled?
Hold on. That is. Oh, there. Could have it now there.
Yeah, take another crack at it. Oh yeah.
All right, there we go.
Okay, how's that look?
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay, great. All right, so Wendy and I would like to thank everyone for skipping the Seahawks game today to listen in on our update. Also, a big thanks to the GPAC for the efforts of island residents over the years to secure funding for this study, as well as everyone's help with our data collection efforts over the past couple of years. In our talk today, we'll revisit some of the objectives of the study. So if you've been to this meeting in the past, you might see a few things that look familiar, but we'll also give an update on the progress we've made on those objectives since the last time we met. So this would be a bit of a mix of some project overview that we've discussed in the past for those who need a refresher or are less familiar with the project, and some of the findings we made so far. All the members of our project team are with the Washington Water Science Center, including Wendy and I, and also Lisa Faster, who was on the call last year. She led our field efforts and data field processing. Lise Wright, who is taking on the task of modeling the water recharge on the island, and Audrey Martinez is compiling water use estimations. USGS is the nation's largest water, earth, biological science, and civilian mapping agency. We monitor and study a wide range of water resources and water conditions, including stream flow, groundwater, water quality, and water use and availability. For whoever isn't familiar with USGS. So the focus of the study that we've been doing is to evaluate current groundwater conditions. Since precipitation is the sole source of recharge of the aquifers in the island, one of the objectives of the study is to improve the estimates of recharge from precipitation to the groundwater system and describe aquifer recharge areas. Also to create a current water budget, we've compiled and have been calculating water use estimations to reflect current conditions. So the USGS Soil Water Balance Model, or SWB, has been used to estimate the spatial distribution of recharge or infiltration of water to the ground, evapotranspiration, which is evaporation from the land and plants, canopy interception, which is rainfall intercepted by vegetation, and outflow is surface runoff. This model uses available data records such as daily precipitation and temperature, land cover data, flow direction from land surface elevation, soil properties, which affect how much of the precipitation that makes it to the surface is able to infiltrate into the ground. So the result we've gotten from combining all of this data into the model is a cell-by-cell value of the different water balance components, and these results are now being used to create a water budget for the island. So for example, one item we compiled information on for our SWB model was the available soil water capacity. This parameter is defined as the available water storage divided by the soil thickness for the top meter of soil. So the units for this data are in inches of water per foot of soil thickness, and we obtained this information on a 10-meter grid resolution from the gridded National Soil Survey Geographic. All the information that we use for this is publicly available information that we've kind of been pulling together over the last year or so. Another piece of spatial data needed for the SWB model is hydrologic soil group information. So like the available soil water capacity, this is also obtained from NatSCO on a 10-meter resolution grid. This separates Guemes Island into 4 different soil groups, where soil group A represents soil with high infiltration rate and low runoff potential, working down to soil group D, which represents soils with very slow infiltration rate and high runoff potential. And so you can see in this little map how these soil groups are kind of divided throughout the island. And we've been in compiling this and working this into the data analyses we've been doing for the SWB model. So each SWB model must have a SWB lookup table. So this contains the curve number, maximum recharge, interception, and rooting depth data for each land use type and hydrologic soil group. The curve numbers range from 0 to 100 and describe the tendency for runoff based on the land cover and soil group type. Higher curve numbers mean there will be more runoff. Lower curve numbers mean less runoff. Maximum recharge rate is given in inches per day and sets a daily limit on recharge amounts. Interception is given in inches and describes the amount of water that is intercepted by vegetation. The rooting depth is given in feet as the depth of the vegetation in the root zone. So one of the components that we've been working on lately that's kind of specific to Guemes Island, I suppose it all is, but the beaver pond, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with, we've been trying to decide how to handle the beaver pond exactly. It's kind of a unique situation that it's too big of a water body that, for us to ignore in our calculations, because it really does influence what happens to the precipitation and to the infiltration into the groundwater. So we've been assessing the size of it. I recently received some parameters on the size of the beaver pond from Skagit County. They were able to help us out with the shapefile that we needed for this analysis. So we are including that in our analysis for the SWB. So the model output that we've gotten and are still kind of working on from the SWB model looks a little bit like this. After assembling the necessary inputs, the SWB model gave us some preliminary results, which are shown here. And this model provides daily potential recharge amounts spatially distributed across our study area. So we ran this model for a 40-year period from 1980 to 2020, and the image shown here shows the recharge amounts for 1 day in our model run. So to summarize where we're at with the SWB model, we've successfully constructed the model to estimate groundwater recharge for Guemes Island and obtain preliminary results. We still have some calibration that we need to do before we can finalize our results, though. So we'll compare our SWB recharge estimates to previous recharge estimates in the area, and this work is part of a larger project that'll be combined with water use estimates to provide an updated water balance for Guemes Island. Our second task for the project was to determine water use throughout the island to ultimately include in water budget calculations. So there are 3 main methods to estimate groundwater withdrawals for public supply and domestic wells. This map that we're showing here is taken from the Skagit County website and shows the locations of Group A and Group B systems on the island. Excellent information came directly from the water suppliers on the island. We contacted nature providers and asked them to volunteer to share the monthly pumpage from their wells. So their monthly values have helped us come up with rates that are being used to estimate the differences in water use by season. And the next source of data for Group A public supply wells came from the Washington Department of Health. Systems that have more than 15 connections are required to report annual pumpage to the agency. So we collected that directly from Department of Health. So for self-supplied domestic wells and Group B systems, there are no reporting requirements. We've estimated the water use using per capita rates estimated using the first 2 methods and U.S. Census data. And then livestock water use has also been incorporated in this. It's been estimated by multiplying the number of animals by a water use coefficient. So shown here is some of the preliminary results we've got for Group A water use on a grid scale. The dark blue showing higher use on the island. And as mentioned, these systems, the Group A systems have more than 15 connections to be considered Group A water users. And Group B systems are defined as a water system that serves less than 15 connections and less than 25 people per day, or 25 or more people per day during fewer than 60 days per year. So these are some of the results that we've gotten shown here on the Group B water use. And you can kind of see the contrast between Group A and Group B when you toggle back and forth a little bit, how the Group A and Group B are kind of split into different parts of the island. And then self-supply water use, of course, is well use, and that's throughout the island, landowners throughout the island. So we've compiled that as well in our water use study. So using the output from the SWB model for recharge and the groundwater withdrawal information, an updated water budget is being calculated. Water budget for the hydrologic system includes accounting for inflows that include precipitation, surface water, and or groundwater inflows from outside the system, and outflows that include evapotranspiration, groundwater pumpage, and outflows to surface or groundwater. So this schematic here kind of shows, I apologize for the black and white nature of this, but it really is a good representation of island hydrologic system, kind of showing all the components of water use and recharge, and also what it does when it infiltrates into the ground and makes its way down into seawater. So task 3 was the groundwater site inventory to help understand the resources on the island. Spatial distribution of the wells paired with the driller's logs for lithology and construction information and measured water levels provides the data for water level maps and groundwater directions and gradients that are essential for our analyses. So the week of September 11th to 16th, 2022, we had 3 teams of 2 USGS employees that were visiting on the island to complete the inventory and measure water levels in the wells. We were able to revisit many of the original 83 wells from the 1995 Guemes Island study that the USGS did. But we also added additional wells by volunteers, and over 80 wells were visited during the week. We visited on Guemes Island. So the data that we collected that week has gone through a review process and has now been entered into the USGS National Water Information System, or NWIS. So system entry is now complete and available to the public. So I included an image from NWIS shown on this slide. If you visit this, the NWIS system and zoom in on Guemes, you can click on any of these little whatever these are, these little markers, I guess you call them the red and black symbols, and they'll show you some of the results that we had from our visit out to Guemes. So to summarize, tasks 1 and 2 are currently being finalized with the field and data entry components of the well inventory now complete. The SWB model is in its final stages, and the water use data has been collected and processed in GIS and is now being calculated for the water budget. We'll finalize the analysis and finish writing the report in the coming months. Winter 22 and spring of 23 of the final report published by September 2024. So in addition to publishing a standard report, much like Sue Kale's 1995 SIR, USGS data release for the SWB model inputs, as well as the GIS data, will also be published. So thanks everybody for your time. We have time for questions, but you're also welcome to send us an email if you think of anything after the talk today. Question at a later time. This QR code that we're listing up here will take you directly to the USGS Guemes Island webpage, or you can also just search USGS Guemes Island.
Okay.
Questions?
Are there any questions out there? I'd like to start with the first question. Nobody minds. Mark, go ahead.
Okay.
Mark, you want to come up here? So people on Zoom can see your beautiful face.
And hear you.
Hello, considering that Guemes Island has 3 to 5 billion gallons of rainwater landing on the island each year, would you consider 100 residential wells as reducing the level of any of the aquifers?
That's a good question. I think it's a little early to be able to answer that, but we really will be able to provide a good answer for those kind of questions after we get through, the nuts and bolts of our study. The SWB model that we're coming up with, it takes a while to compile everything and to calibrate everything. It takes a long time. It can anyway, but it really gives you an accurate representation of what's going on in the model. So, when we get to that point, then we'll be able to answer that with a pretty accurate response. So that's what I apologize for the vagueness of the answer at this point, but we will be able to come up with a pretty precise answer for that when everything's pulled together.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, to really get a sense, probably a numerical groundwater model would be the ultimate tool to be able to say, okay, once you've established what the water levels are and the volume of water that you have from the water budget, the numerical model will allow you to, add wells, spatially in a hypothetical situation and see what that effect would have on the water level. So really, that would be the ultimate tool that you'd be able to ask questions like that. Or if your precipitation increases or decreases or changes times of year, those are the kinds of questions that a numerical model would answer. And not so much, for this type of project.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Leland, you had a couple maps up there going back. A couple in particular. One showed the receptivity of soils to be able to I guess recharge the aquifer, and I believe maybe, that was in orange. Yeah, keep going back and we'll find it.
I think I know the one you're talking about. This one?
Yeah, so that's hydrogeological soil groups. So correct me if I'm wrong, the lighter orange there would be not as receptive, and the darker orange would be more receptive.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so actually though, just a fine point there, it's a hydrologic soil group. So it's not necessarily tied to hydrogeology. So if you were looking at the map from Sue Kale's report, where she has the surficial units, the geologic units mapped, this is different. So this is based on soil, which doesn't always match, right, the mapped unit. So there might be some little differences there. But typically, like if you're familiar with a hydrogeologic unit, like a till, like a glacial till, that would be less able to accept water, more likely for water to run off. Where if you have a really sandy soil, like an outwash from a glacial deposit, then it would have a high infiltration and low runoff potential, which means it's going to be able to, like, if that water lands there, it's going to be able to. And one thing we're dealing with this.
No, no. Did we lose Wendy?
We might have lost Wendy. So
We have
Still
Puget
trying.
Sound wide project. Oh no. Oh, weird. Okay. Darn it. How about now? Nothing?
yeah,
Can hear you now, yeah.
Oh, weird. I'm sorry. Don't know what happened there. Anyway, there's slightly difference between the soils at the land surface and the hydrogeologic units that you're seeing.
okay. So what I think is interesting, though, you guys all know that the water rushes down off the mountain quite a bit. So in the winter time, you see those ditches right where the barn is out there in the when you go through that part of the road. Those ditches in December and January fill up because the water is not being able to be, I guess, precipitated percolated into the soils, and it goes right into the beaver pond. So that's very useful. Now the next couple of slides going forward, if you don't mind, Leland.
This here?
No, keep going. Yeah, here we go. So this model, again, explain, if you don't mind, what we're seeing here, what the different colors represent. In other words, the lighter color versus the darker color.
Yeah, so this is one day, a representation of one day of the overall recharge that we're seeing on the island. So the darker color would be low recharge, and then the lighter color would be higher recharge. And that, I mean, this is a really kind of quick and dirty image that we pulled together based on the preliminary info that we have. And that, you know, this will be polished up a lot more when we get to the final stages of everything. But you know, you can see the darker areas are where we're expecting less recharge for this particular day, and then the lighter areas are where it's expected to have more recharge.
Okay. What I think is interesting about this slide is it shows from the Veal Pond to North Beach, that diagonal that bisects the island there. Nobody lives there by and large, right? That's DNR land and the Veal Pond, and I mean, I'm sure there are some homes in that area until you get to North Beach. I think that's kind of interesting, and that I would have expected to see the center of the island having greater recharge, but I guess that's not the case.
So I'm going to put in the chat. I know everybody else won't be able to see it. Just a shot of official geologic map that came out in Sue Kale's report. recharge area matches up really well with where till is mapped at land surface, which tends not to receive water very well. So, and those would be those two kind of darker blobs right there.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'd like to have Liz come up and speak if she would.
Thank you. Hey, for the benefit of our USGS folks who don't know in the audience, I'm Senator Liz Loveland. I ran the budget proviso to commission this study. And I chair the local government land use and tribal affairs committee. And I also helped push so that San Juan County can have a similar study commission for their major 3 islands. And part of the reason that I wanted to champion this proviso was because being able to materially tie water availability to land use decisions moving into the future is incredibly important. So I'm wondering, you know, now that we have this data, how do we best utilize it to inform both, you know, this for the Skagit County Planning Departments and eventually for the San Juan County Department to determine how many water allocations we have for future development versus what we'll need to maintain for existing residencies. And then another question around teeing up for San Juan Island in particular, they started doing PFAS testing in particularly the Class A water systems around the state. And I don't know if it's come to your attention, but the Hannah Heights water system on San Juan Island has discovered some of the highest levels of PFAS contamination in the state to date. And I'm just wondering if you do any water quality testing that does any toxics. Thank you.
Want to try that one?
We do have some PFAS studies that are happening, you know, and those typically involve a groundwater model. You know, we do 3D groundwater models with the USGS. We have a program that does really well with it, and when you pair together some contaminant transport packages with those, then you can come up with some pretty accurate estimations of what would happen to a contaminant like PFAS. So that, you know, to my knowledge, isn't you know, an issue on Guemes, but the groundwater model itself, as Wendy mentioned before, would be really helpful for making decisions like the ones that you were bringing up. You know, water availability and planning going into the future in terms of you know, the allotments of water, the allocation, and you know, how you're, you know, making decisions like zoning and all that. You know, you could get pretty precise with that, and that would be helpful. But you'll also be able to do a lot with our study, though. We'll have a cell by cell analysis of you know, all the water recharge estimates and the water use estimates based on everything that we're putting into our SWB model and our water use calculations available from the study. I hope that helps. Did I miss anything out of that? You had a few questions in there. I tried to get to those.
So hi, my name is Steve Orsini, and I participated in the first USGS study and had the pleasure of working with Sue Cahill. So you had a good basis to start from, I would say. But,
sure do.
The issue, major issue for Guemes Island, especially on the narrow north end, is seawater intrusion. And most of the wells along North Beach, with the exception of one group B, have failed with seawater intrusion. And there's been a major failure on West Beach, and they've had to go to seawater for reverse osmosis. Does the study, without cheating and jumping ahead, give us a more definition of the areas of seawater intrusion, or where that might be a liability moving forward for new wells? Thanks.
I think the study will, in its final form, will have some pretty good estimates of, what areas are more susceptible to seawater intrusion. But like you mentioned, it is a little preliminary at this point to talk about that specific area. But we will also provide a comparison between the 1995 study and ours, and we'll have, so you'll be able to see the trend that everything is, seen over the past 20 years, 30 years.
Leland, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but Phyllis Bravender has a question. I'll read it to you. Can the stormwater runoff causing pollution into the Salish Sea, example of Guemes Island Road down to the ferry, be contained and used by creation of rain gardens as they are in Seattle? Might these address two issues, both containment of polluted water into the sound and increase amount of water available to find its way down to the aquifer?
That'd be an interesting analysis. I mean, that's not really, seeing what kind of recharge from something like that, how that would change what we have currently.
It's probably too small of a scale, right, for our particular recharge modeling to address. But stormwater management, is definitely something that we study in our office. It's not necessarily part of this study. You'd have to be able to quantify the volume of water that was being, contained, and you could add that into a future, groundwater model. But for this particular recharge study, it doesn't take into account stormwater runoff as a volume, because we don't have a way to account for that.
Okay, thank you.
On a related note, I did want to clarify, there aren't any sewer system, like public sewer systems on the island at the moment, right?
No, correct.
Okay. Yeah.
Patty.
So, hello. My questions are pretty basic. I think I understood you to say that we will be able to compare our water quality in terms of seawater intrusion now to 1994 once your report is completed. Is that right?
Yeah, there will be. We have collected chloride samples in both studies, so we'll be able to do it on that level once the study's complete, and be able to compare the two sets of reports.
And is that also true with the supply of water? We'll be able to compare our supply of water now to what it was in 1994?
Yeah, the availability of fresh water, I think we'll be able to make some implications about the difference between the two for various parts of the island, even between the two reports. Yeah.
Well, that's going to be really interesting. And then I'm also curious about these aquifer recharge areas, whether we're going to be able to identify obvious aquifer recharge areas that we should try to protect in some way.
Yeah. I mean, there will be, some spots we'll be able to identify. It's usually pretty obvious when you really start digging into the SWB model and the recharge locations, where that's happening a little bit more readily than other areas. So, I think that'll be available in the final analysis.
That's great. I just had one more question, and I don't know. I went to that map that you linked to with the specific sites that you'd studied. And
the endless page. Yeah.
I found it very difficult as a layperson to navigate that. Would it make sense for you to run through it and show us what kind
I
of?
was thinking about that actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Is the slide still up there?
Mhm.
See if I can pull that up. Okay, can everyone see this then? So if you go to so this is on the the NWIS landing page there when you zoom in on Guemes Island. Did you get to this point, Patty?
Yeah.
Yes, I got that far.
Okay, yeah. So if you double click on these, yeah, if you click on it, or actually just hover over that and then click on access data, then it will bring you to this. And then if you go to groundwater level measurements, click on that, and it will give you some measurements that were taken. It'll just show all the data that was collected. So you can get it in table form, which will give you some actual readings of water level feet below land surface, and then above vertical datum. And, yeah. So, but basically, all the data that we've collected for each of these points is available when you just click on these spots.
Leland, real quick, what is the data that we should be looking at, particularly when you hover over that and you came up with a set of tables or a set of values? Which thing is the most useful for a layperson to look at?
If you're interested in there are some of these that are repeat measurements, as I understand. I need to dig through them and find some, but I mean, if there are records that were taken and entered from the 1995 study, they should be available in there in this, as well as the current data that was collected. So if you wanted to see a comparison between the two studies, then that should be available via this page.
So would that be the head height of the water versus 1994? Like, for example?
Yeah. The current levels versus 1994. You should be able to see that in here.
Does it help you guys? Okay.
Just know you have to drill down.
Yeah, get this drill down.
86.
But that's the official Republic County.
Right.
Yeah. So this is, for example, this is one.
People with a higher pay grade than ours.
So this well had measurements taken in 1986, 1991, and also 2022. So you can go into ones like this and see the difference in the water level measurements for that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as a reminder, every year is a little different. So if you looked at one well and you say, oh, wow, it's 6 feet deeper now to the water level, or 6 feet higher, that can be a very seasonal thing. It's not necessarily that water levels in general are going down. You won't be able to see that just from the individual points necessarily.
It's also important to look at some of the qualifiers we have in that data as well. There were some wells that we visited, and there was pumping going on. For example, when at the time that we took the measurement, and we do our best when that's happening, but it's really not the most accurate measurement, and we try to qualify that in our records.
I have a question. I may have missed something in your presentation, but can you help me picture like what kind of geological style is underground that would accept water into a recharge area? And
And even though like the first meter might be accepting the water, it might get a clay layer and go on down to the sea. Can you kind of help clarify? Give me a picture of what the water does underground.
Yeah, there's a couple of different aquifers that are on the island, and the water will behave a little bit differently in those aquifers depending on how conductive the material is in the aquifers. So if there's some different conductance values, and the aquifers will be able to provide water to wells a little bit more readily, depending on the type of the aquifer that it encounters down there. And there will, I'm trying to remember if there are any clay layers that are really predominant throughout Guemes Island, and I can't think of anything offhand, but in areas where there is clay, then it'll tend to push water one way or the other. Preferential flow, it's called. If there's a more conductive layer, then the water will tend to go with that instead of on the clay layer.
Yeah, and the geologic units, with the glacial deposits are kind of notoriously a mess. And so it's, if you look back at Sue Kale's report, because, this current study, we didn't look at the hydrogeology. We weren't trying to build a new framework, but the study that she did was excellent. And I put a link in the chat. I know maybe somebody there, or even I guess Leland maybe could open it up if people wanted to see it. It looks like, there is a pretty substantial clay layer, but it's not there on the whole, across the entire part of the island, the Whidbey Formation. So that's a few units down, and that's a significant clay layer that, yes, it would be, we would consider it a confining unit, and water wouldn't necessarily be transmitted through it very easily. So the glacial deposits kind of tend to fluctuate back and forth from these really dense, clay to more of the sandy gravel, and sometimes like the till I mentioned before, which has a pretty high percentage of clay in it as well. Yeah, so this is plate 1 from the study from 1995, and I think it's really good. If you scroll down, there's several cross sections across the island. You can see the dark brown is where the bedrock is exposed on the high part of the island, and that tends to be the most confining of all. Like you were saying before, how the water just seems to run right off, the high point. But yeah, I think the orange layer that you kind of see, that I believe is more of a confining unit that's sitting on top of the reddish unit. But you can see it's not everywhere. So.
Yeah, thanks for putting that up, Wendy. That really helps to have a visual of that. And like we were talking before about the different soil types and the amount of infiltration expected, you can really see it across here, that band of till that we were talking about before. It was kind of the darker blue, I think, that was straight across this area.
Yeah, or actually, yeah, I think it matches up with the yellow pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that QP is the peat. That lines up pretty well with the, not quite, I know the Beaver Pond is a little farther south from that, but it's definitely a boggy kind of peat area. And this could be refined with further study, since there are additional wells that have been drilled in the last 20 some years. I think Sue Kale's framework is excellent. There probably wouldn't be any dramatic differences with the new wells that were drilled as far as having information to build that. But that does always help too, having a higher density of wells. I know it doesn't help you guys, but it helps give us information about what's going on in the subsurface.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Well, I'd like to thank Leland and Wendy very much for you guys coming out. We're hoping maybe by sometime in 2025, all this information will be finalized? Would that be
The end of
24? I mean, 24.
2024 September is what we're aiming for. But
Okay.
yeah, we'll keep you coming with the updates and everything. But yeah, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
And we'll post those both on Line Time and Mike Giga websites, so people could, you know, the final presentation. That'd be very helpful. You have one more thing?
Well, can we invite you back closer to September 2024 when we have final report hot off the griddle?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll have a lot more to share, you know, in finalized form at that point. So
Yeah, we'd love to have you back. This is a great value to us. Thank you.
yeah, it's really good to talk to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I want to. Thank you. That was, I think we're starting to get better understanding of all this. It's going to take, as you saw, a bit more of these guys taking this data and massaging it so that it's in a report that we can all absorb. But if you just look at these maps intuitively, you go, oh, that makes sense. That area is a wetland. I know it's wetland. Or that area is like up by the north part of the island where we live. It's not very receptive. Our little section where our house is receptive. It was owned by the Northwest Gravel Company, the 1940s, because it's sand and gravel. But you go another 150 feet to the center there, and it's wetland, and it's not receptive. So again, thank you, Liz, very much. We really appreciated your I helped you.
Well, as a project, there is no